We have another person, another individual that's lamenting what has happened with rock music over the course of the past couple of years. We now have Shaun from Seether speaking out against this, lamenting the state of rock radio in the United States of America. There's an article about this over on blabbermouth.net, and within that article it also uses some words that were stated by Rob Zombie about, right around the same time that Gene Simmons was saying that rock was dead. So this reaction video isn't so much toward Shaun Morgan, it's more toward the state of rock and roll music in the United States, especially on the radio. And I want to preface this by saying that I have owned an iPod before, and of course I have a lot of CDs, I have a lot of things that I can play back in the car, but I still listen to a good bit of radio, whether it be one of the stations that are local to the area that play alternative rock or just rock music, classic rock, and there's even one that borders on a little bit of old school progressive rock or just hard rock from the 1970s, and I also listen to a lot of talk radio. So I'm a bit qualified to at least speak about this area, about the Pittsburgh area at least, but whenever it comes nationwide, I don't have a scope of each and every single radio station, so please bear with me whenever it comes to that. Here in 2015, the one thing that I've noted about a lot of the stations around my area is something that actually Shaun echoes in his article and in his interview that he gave for Blabbermouth, and it's the fact that it seems like a lot of these stations are still echoing a lot of the same artists from the past, and the ones that he stated were bands such as Alice in Chains, and I'm guessing that he is talking about songs such as Rooster and Them Bones, and Man in the Box, to name three. And I have to agree with that, even though I love Alice in Chains. If there's one thing that has happened a good bit in this area is the fact that there is a definite worship to songs from the 1990s and the early portion of the 2000s. A lot of new metal is played on that station, and really whenever it comes to newer groups that are getting promoted, the ones that you're going to see are your Five Finger Death Punches of the world, and the new Disturbed song is of course now hitting the airwaves nationwide, so there is a bit of a revival in that, and it's something that happens whenever new singles do drop, but it's certainly not what it used to be. It definitely seems that a lot of these stations have transitioned more into rock alternative stations, which, well, the one thing I'll say is that a lot of those stations that are kind of being criticized for this were rock alternative stations from the start. So the first way in which I would really cure the whole situation with current rock and roll bands feeling like they're kind of getting the snub by a lot of other individuals and by the radio stations that once gave them everything that they ever wanted is the fact that there needs to be a bit of an establishment of some stations that actually fulfill that which your scene is kind of a part of. If you don't want to be lumped in with alternative radio, then all of you together need to form a collective and get something started. Unfortunately, it's just kind of as simple as that. Unfortunately, here in 2015, with the way in which things have gone, communications and the like, and especially radio communications, does not appear to be that lucrative of a career to a lot of individuals, considering everybody is getting what they want instantaneously, and it's either through their own choice, through iPods, through the iTunes stores, and through their phones. Either that, or there has definitely been a planes shift whenever it comes to what is really popular. Whenever these stations were big, you have to remember that alternative rock was kind of the lay of the land. It was something where pop rock was right there, enjoying a little bit of a boom period by and large by themselves, but these alternative rock groups were coming out of nowhere and scoring huge, huge hits. So you really have to get a lot of these people involved, and you kind of have to make this career look like a lucrative opportunity for these individuals, because right now, if you're in the communications industry, you're not making all of that much. In fact, you're struggling to survive. The second thing that you have to do, and the second thing that you have to realize, is the fact that a lot of the funding and a lot of the reach that these stations are gaining, really, they haven't gained. They've been losing. In fact, if you take a look at a pop radio station versus a alternative or a rock station, there is a huge discrepancy whenever it comes to the millions of listeners that a major powered station is able to reach, to the tune of 3 to 1 in some instances and in some cases. Now, in the case of the Pittsburgh station that I speak about often, I'm able to hear that station all the way into West Virginia, and that's about a 60 or 70 mile reach, which means I would also be able to hear this over in Wheeling, West Virginia, and probably the earliest parts of Ohio. And as far as points north, I have been told that there are some people that are up near the Erie area that have been able to pick up the station as well. So if you look at that within a 4-directional radius, it's about a 280-mile radius, and it's probably picking up about maybe 2 to 3 million people at the very maximum. And that's just potential reach. That has nothing to do with the actual reach that they get on a daily basis. Now, secondly, you also have the advent of Clear Channel, and you have the ability for this to be streamed online by anybody worldwide, which is definitely a huge bonus, but it's something that not all stations have. So you have to understand that if your station that was part of your market does not have that option, then they're not going to be able to broadcast to that wide of a reach. So what's the difference here? And it's the fact that, well, rock music isn't exactly selling like pop music, so it is a business decision. It sucks, and that's not what it should be all about, but really what needs to happen here, what really should occur, is that, first of all, rock music itself needs to have a bit of a revitalization. There needs to be somebody that comes and acts like rock and roll's pacemaker and gets its heart beating a little bit. There are a couple of bands out there that I feel are doing that right now, such as, for example, the Black Keys, the Foo Fighters, bands that are being consistent enough right now that it continues to maintain that pulse for rock and roll. But then you have to have a bunch of young guns come in and really, really stimulate crowds with something that has a little bit of a new breed sound to it. And Seether and Rob Zombie, actually, I don't really hate to say this, but that's not you. Your time was in the past, and it sounds so terrible that the march of time is so cruel. But in order to revitalize this whole machine, it's going to take a revolution. It's going to take something that's a bit new. It's going to take something that's a bit inventive, a little bit innovative. The reason why alternative rock took off in the 90s was because it was already being spearheaded and already really being drawn upward in the 1980s. So something that could be happening right now in the underground could actually be the propeller point for rock and roll's return here within the next couple of years. But if you think that you guys are going to be able to do it by yourselves, it's not going to exactly happen. The needs are definitely going to be a little bit different. Another thing that I will say is that if you want to establish something, we need to kind of differentiate a little bit. Alternative rock and classic rock, what's the real difference anymore? Alternative rock is getting some years on it. Soon it will be classic rock. There's a lot of 80s stuff that now is could really be considered classic rock, but it's considered more new wave. Well, I mean, we have all these differentiations, and you would think that that would lead to a boom where there would be tons of radio stations that want to specifically cater to certain styles of music. That way everybody is represented. But that's not the case at all. That's not what's going on. The business today is very fractured. So what is the true solution? I mean, I have a couple of suggestions that I just offered, but are they really even all of that good? That's the real problem. You have to remember also that there are so many bands out there these days that promoting each and every one of them through a radio station is next to impossible. It was next to impossible 20 years ago whenever you had to have a deal and have talent and, not necessarily be DIY in order to end up on the radio. You were part of a pantheon of well-qualified individuals in the eyes of the record companies. And if you remember even back then, it wasn't always a guarantee that you would make it to the radio. If you did, there was a chance that you were pretty fortunate. So now with the explosion of bands that are doing things DIY and with the explosion of bands that are getting signed based off of their appearances on television shows or on YouTube via social media and things like that, there is just an overwhelming amount out there, and really it becomes a saturated pool, and that's exactly what we've had right here. So maybe what the truest way to repair this situation is a revitalization and a relooking at how the business itself kind of operates and how it's run and how things are promoted and how things are really kind of pushed. Because right now it seems as though even though we have this wide swath, we have this large, gregarious amount of rock and roll bands or just groups out there, period, whether it be rock and roll, heavy metal, acid jazz, rap, pop, whatever it may be. There's just so many that go around, but only a few truly get all of the promo that they deserve. Perhaps funds need to be distributed a little bit more properly Perhaps marketing needs to be handled just a little bit differently. Perhaps we need to see whether or not this market is ready for a large-scale boom as far as the magazine or the publication market is concerned with rock and roll. This is something where rock and roll has to help itself if it's going to be better. It can't just sort of sit around and bitch about itself. But I want to know what everybody out there is thinking about this, because we've talked about it before, but it's something that keeps coming up for one, and it doesn't seem like things are getting better. If anything, it seems like things are getting worse and people are starting to get frustrated. I want to know in the comments below, for those of you who have watched, what it's like in your area. Do you have a dedicated rock and roll station? Do you have a dedicated alternative rock station? Or is this something where you're lucky to hear a Nickelback song on a pop station and they call that rock and roll? Because that's not representative of the entire genre, obviously, and we're not even touching heavy metal in this one. I want to know about that, and I also want to know what your suggestions would be as to how to sort of repair the situation and how to further enhance rock and roll to a point where it becomes something that everybody can't live without once again. Thank you very much for watching. This has been part of the 24 Hours of Cover Killer Nation marathon. In case you guys have been wondering, we have fan funding that's available. If you do happen to give, I am extremely thankful. Please do me a favor and like and or dislike the video underneath, and leave your comments and subscribe. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I am Cover Killer Nation, and let's revitalize rock. I've been saying this for a while, but we really do need to make a push. We're typically a heavy metal station, but rock and roll is like our cousin, and our cousin hasn't fucked up that bad. Come on, they really haven't. We need to do something to help out rock and roll. Thanks.